Hello everybody and welcome to Class 4 Part 2, Intercultural Listening Skills. So we've talked about listening before, and as Rogers and Farson say, listening builds deep positive relationships and tends to alter constructively the attitudes of the listener. Listening is a growth experience. So I'd like you now to take 5 minutes. You can stop the video and take 5 minutes and write down 3 to 5 ways in which you show that you are listening to somebody. This is something I think you're very good at because I think you're very good listeners. But you might want to just jot down now what 3 to 5 ways in which you show that you are listening to someone are. Thank you. So I'll come back to you in 5 minutes, turn it off and come back again when you're ready. So we're back after your activity, and now we're looking at a slide called interpersonal listening skills. The person who is listening gives feedback to the speaker. This allows the sender to make the required adjustments to make her or himself clearly understood. Effective listening essentially leads to more open communication, along with an effective method of sending the message. So basically all that I'm saying here is that interpersonal listening is a two-way process. We don't think about it very often, but when we are speaking to one another, we are often giving feedback. We are always, giving feedback to the speaker. So, for example, when I'm speaking in the class, there is a certain amount of feedback coming to me, whether people are bored, whether they're asleep, whether they're interested. You kind of know this even if they're not speaking to you. And if they are speaking to you, you're getting cues from what they're saying as well. So effective listening, paired with an effective method of sending the message, essentially leads to more open communication. And this is just a graphic. You don't have to worry about it too much, but there's constantly a feedback going between a sender and a receiver. There's a constant encoding and decoding. There's the sender and the receiver all the time, back and forth, encoding, decoding what the other is saying, So it's definitely a sort of sender-receiver model, and that's basically what listening is. And as I say, it's a two-way process. So, however, successful communication is in fact a two-way process whereby the receiver plays an equally important role. Okay? Because of the emphasis on the sending and the message, listening is often a technique in communication that remains underappreciated. So, in other words, what it's saying is we're always communicating. We're always talking and listening. But a lot of attention is given to how we talk to one another, what we say. Not an awful lot of attention is given to how we listen. We often, I know this is taking the point quite far, but we often say, oh, so-and-so said, Dominic said, such and such a thing. Dominic said X, Y, and Z. But we don't really go around thinking, wasn't Dominic really listening to that? Okay? But in intercultural communications, you have to think maybe a lot more about the listening process than you might do normally. Okay? Because there's a lot of things that you don't take for granted. So I, for instance, could have a number of people, and in future classes we will have, but I could have people from different parts of the world. And I could ask them to do the activity that you just did. And you will find that in different parts of the world, what the idea of a good listener is different. So in certain parts of the world, interrupting somebody when they're speaking shows that they are listening. Not in other parts of the world, not interrupting somebody shows that they are listening. So it kind of, there's a lot of things like this in intercultural communications, and being a competent intercultural person means that you're becoming aware of these differences, these nuances, and you're able to handle it. And you're able to acknowledge that, okay, that's just a different way of doing things. It doesn't mean that you have to become the same as the other, but that you do have to kind of try to begin to understand. And it's not easy at all. A very hard thing to do, actually. So I'm not underestimating it. So when it comes cross-cultural listening then, as I said, when it comes to communicating across cultures, Lewis argues that there are differences in listening habits which can lead to miscommunication if one is not fully aware of how to bridge potential gaps. So, active listening, well, all that's saying really is that when people are actively listening, it is different from one culture to another. And we talked about active listening last year. Active listening is about listening with sincerity, sensitivity, and creating a climate of where equality, freedom, permissiveness, understanding, acceptance, and warmth. And there are various techniques to help create such a positive atmosphere. So we did practice a bit of active listening last year, and it takes a lot of concentration. And it's something that you can actually develop and practice. Some people are more natural active listeners, I think, but I do think that it's something you can also learn. And some people find it easier than others. So cross-cultural sensitivity then involves, to start with, being able to listen to the other culture. So the importance of cross-cultural sensitivity becomes important when looking to create such an atmosphere of trust in order to relay the desired response to the sender and to avoid miscommunication. In cross-cultural interactions, there are certain discrepancies of how to create such an atmosphere of trust and what is considered as appropriate behaviour in active listening, depending on the culture one is dealing with. Essentially, there tends to be a certain etiquette associated with trust building and listening in different parts of the world. Okay, so how somebody might do something in Lesotho or in Hong Kong or in Shanghai or in Dublin may be very, very different. And you could actually find yourself in a situation where you're really kind of I suppose insulting somebody sometimes without even knowing it, because you're just following the cues that you're used to. We all do that, and it's very hard to change. But intercultural communications is about learning how to change that. How to understand that in another culture things might be different, and what is understood as respect may not be the same as what respect is in our culture. Okay. So that doesn't mean that the person in the other culture is being disrespectful. It just means that there's a different way of doing things in that culture. So even the words yes and no can be misinterpreted due to their different meanings in different parts of the world. Actually, this is an experience I had myself, and one that would be very hard to explain. And I think I told you it before, when I was working in Italy and I was asked to do something. And I said nah in a way that it would be even impossible for me to tell you what that means almost. But if I said it here, people would know immediately that what I was saying was yes, but of course they heard it as no, since it was the word no. So like words can have different meanings with different tones, and it depends sometimes on the way they're said, you know, and that can cause misunderstandings as well. And in my case, actually, it did cause a misunderstanding that needed to be sorted out, you know. Um, and apparently, according to Beauvais, research found that US white males respond most of the time non-verbally when listening attentively, while US black males respond most of the time with words. And that's some research that was carried out. And again, these would be tendencies. It's not that one is better or worse than the other, it's just that it's a different culture and a different way of doing things. And a culture doesn't mean necessarily within an entire country or nationality. There are subgroups, or there are different cultures within cultures. So, you know, you could, for example, have a Latino culture in an area, and you could have a completely different kind of like Pakistani culture or something down the road in the same city, and they could have different tendencies again. Likewise, you could have a youth culture. I mean, sometimes I was at the hairdressers the other day, and there was these 2 or 3 young people around the age of 20, and quite honestly, I didn't know one word. I didn't understand a word they were talking about. It's because I suppose there was a whole culture around their way of life and their way of talking that actually made it quite difficult for me to listen, because I wasn't really following what they were saying. So there are cultures within cultures, I suppose. In Japan on the one hand and Lebanon on the other. So it will be interesting to find out how, with the people in the course from different cultures, what they think is a way of listening in their culture. I suppose in any case, you know, the best you can do, if you're not sure, I think you can do a certain amount of finding out about a culture. If you're going to be spending a lot of time in a particular culture, even in your own country, say, for example, with youth culture, or with a culture in a particular, I don't know, maybe a particular community, a particular tribe, or a community, or a village, or something, that there's a particular type of a culture, that there's a group within your country that their general orientation is sort of different. You can find out a certain amount about it so that you can be respectful when you're dealing with them. If you're working, say, at work with a lot of Irish people all the time, you would do the same. And the same on the other hand, if you know, the Irish should be kind of doing their bit as well. So we can do a certain amount of preparation. But in any case, I suppose you can, I mean, most people are open to you asking the question to clarify, you know, is this what you're saying? Because people aren't stupid either. People know that you're from a different culture, and they don't expect you, they know that it's not just about language, but they know that there is a difference, and most people do try their very best. So if you ask for a clarification on something, it's not, I would say I can't see how in most cultures that would be seen as rude. It would be more just trying to a point of clarification. So, you know, what you need to do in intercultural listening is to take time and be mindful. Try to kind of look out for the ways of being respectful and showing empathy, you know, and try to, you know, try to become aware of those nuances and try to practice them if you're in another culture. So if you were to tell an Irish or Basotho classmate how you listen in your culture, what would you say? So that might be an interesting thing to put up on the forum. You know, what would you say if you were, and from any country really, as to how people listen in your culture. In fact, most of us don't even think about it very much. I think I would actually find it very hard if somebody on the spot came up to me and said, how do people in your culture listen? I'm not sure if it's something that I could answer quickly, because unless I had thought it through a bit, because I'm preparing a class or something. So it's interesting to see. And if there are other cultures around you, that are kind of different from your own culture, it would be interesting to start observing maybe this week. How do they listen? What's the way in which they listen? And how can you make it work for both of you, I suppose. Don't assume you understand. You can, and I suppose an effective way to see you understand is to kind of repeat back a bit what you think somebody has said. And people will correct you if they, unless that would be something, that really wouldn't be acceptable in a particular culture. But really, especially in a work context, you can sort of go back and say, is this, I just want to be clear, is this, can I clarify, please, what you're saying? So you're trying to get to the bottom of a source of confusion, listening, like something, there could be a major misunderstanding. For example, you could have, I don't know, say a Spanish student or a Spanish worker or a Spanish intern suddenly come to work with you, and there could be some really awful misunderstanding, and you're there and you kind of feel, what happened there? That feeling is like, and they're probably feeling the same way, that they actually do not know what they have done to you, and you don't know what they've done to that person. So like, I'm not talking about personal stuff now, I'm talking about cultural orientations. So if you feel that something is just, maybe it's just differently done, maybe you could try and find a way to sit down and sort of with one another, and encourage the other person to do likewise. They might be feeling a bit lost. There's probably a lot of people from your culture there, and they might be kind of, they might be coming across as aggressive when being aggressive is natural in their culture, or they might be coming across as sort of, I know it all, when in fact what they might be really feeling is very nervous. So I suppose you need to kind of try to, I don't mean you as in, it's the same no matter where. If it was the same, it would be here as well, and we don't think about this enough really. But I have found, because I have worked with people from all over the world quite a lot in my career, one does learn, and one can learn how to adapt. It doesn't mean it's always easy. And I do think, for me personally, and I don't know if this is always the case, but I think for me personally, there are certain types of cultures that I get on better with than others. And sometimes it has surprised me over the years which ones those are. And I won't mention any in particular, but sometimes the culture that I think should be closest to mine can actually be much further away from mine. But I do think that it's something that you can become more, I suppose it's also about being more secure in yourself to begin with, that you can kind of roll with the other person, and that's where the intercultural becomes a bit interpersonal as well. I think it helps you to develop that ability to roll with it, to not be caught up with every little thing that the person might say or do, or the people around you in the other culture, but that you can kind of go with the flow a little bit, because it's new, and I suppose to remember that if a person comes into your culture as well, the other way around, that they're feeling out of sea. They may not have at sea, should I say. They might be feeling, it might be their first time ever out of their own culture, and this could be a very different experience for them. They might be on their own, they might be young, they might be missing their families, and all of these things might come across in a way to you that's something you don't, if whatever way it comes across, it might be something you don't like. But maybe we need to all kind of think a bit, and I need to think as well when I'm in my classroom and there's students from other cultures. Maybe I need to sit back sometimes and think, what's this like for them? They often, we get students at the university, and all these people, there's you could have 100 students who are kind of Irish, and then maybe these maybe 3 or 4 come from France or Spain or something for a semester, and it's so confusing because there's so many different things that they have to take on board at the same time. They're there to practice their English maybe, but at the same time they have to learn about the education system. They're trying to find housing. They can't fully hear everything that's happening. They don't get the humor. Their language isn't brilliant. There's a lot going on for them, and they're young, and sometimes we forget that if they do something then that kind of seems upsetting, it's a little surprising really, because it's not easy moving into a new culture. So again, it's about asking for clarification. Obviously, if there's a language thing, I'm sure there's lots of language that between you and I we don't understand. There's probably lots of things that I say that you don't understand because I have a completely different accent than you have. And really that it is okay to say, if there's a trust built up between people, it is okay to say, I'm really sorry, I didn't understand what you said. And that links into trust, I think, as well. I think a sincerity can come across between people, no matter what the culture is. And I think if you build up that trust, then it's easier to I suppose it's easier to say things like, I'm really sorry, I didn't understand, because otherwise it could become, oh God, you're not speaking properly or something, so don't be shy to ask for clarification of things that you didn't fully understand. And as I said, be patient, be prepared, try not to be judgmental, be as open-minded as you can. And if you kind of get it wrong, I mean, sometimes we're just tired and we're frustrated and we couldn't be bothered being open-minded, you know what I mean? But, in your times when have time to think about these things, say if there is somebody from another culture coming with you, for example, on a trip, maybe think in advance, okay, I'm going to be open to this now, and actually, prepare a little bit psychologically for it. And also kind of, be aware of the speaker's body language, because, an awful lot of what we hear, an awful lot of communication happens in body language rather than what's just said, and that can give you information about what's going on in the speaker's message as well. That's the lecture for today. There is some reading here. Active listening, cross-cultural business communication skills is a very good active listening. There's another, the second PowerPoint there is again on active listening. The second PowerPoint, I should say, is the web link for the first book there, Active Listening, Cross-Cultural Business Communication Skills. And this was posted by, that's just the reference for it actually. So if you just go to that link, you'll get a lot of information on what I was thinking about, what's talking about today. So I will also send you your next assignment. As you've done, many of you have come back to me now already with your first assignment to your tutors. Thank you, and that should be in today, Friday the 2nd, and I'll give you another one by email tomorrow, which you have 2 weeks to do. That's 2 weeks from Friday the 2nd, so that's about the 9th, and about something around the Friday the 15th, whatever date the Friday is there. All right, so thank you very much, and have a nice day, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.